The bullet tore through the stagecoach door 3 inches from Eliza's face, and she understood with sudden clarity that she was going to die on this godforsaken dirt road in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by screaming horses and men who wanted her blood. The coach tipped, wood splintered, then the desert floor rose up to meet her, and everything went dark. When she opened her eyes again, a man stood over her with a gun in his hand and eyes like winter, the same man her dead father had sold her to in a contract she'd never signed. If you want to know how a Boston lady survived the West's most dangerous sheriff, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The blood on Eliza's hands had dried to a rust-colored crust by the time the sun finally dropped behind the mountains. She sat in the dirt beside the overturned stagecoach, knees drawn up, staring at nothing. 3 bodies lay under canvas tarps 20 feet away. The driver, the shotgun rider, a passenger she'd never learned the name of, all dead within minutes. She should have been the 4th. "Can you stand?" The voice came from behind her, deep, flat. The kind of voice that didn't waste words because words didn't matter much out here. Eliza didn't turn around. "I don't know." "Try." She pushed herself up on shaking legs. Her dress, pale blue silk that had cost more than most people earned in a month, was shredded and filthy. One sleeve hung in tatters. Her hair had come loose from its pins and hung in dark tangles around her face. The man who'd spoken stood near the horses, checking their legs with efficient, impersonal movements. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothes that had seen better years. A sheriff's star was pinned to his vest, dull and scratched. His face was hard-lined, weathered, probably somewhere in his mid-30s. A scar ran from his left eyebrow down to his cheekbone. His gun belt sat low on his hips, worn leather oiled and cared for. "You're Rowan Creed," Eliza said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. He glanced at her briefly, then went back to the horses. "That's right. My father mentioned you." "Did he?" It wasn't a question. Rowan straightened, patted one of the horses on the neck, then walked toward her. His boots made almost no sound on the desert floor. Up close, his eyes were gray, pale, and cold as January ice. "Eliza Whitmore," he said. "Boston. 23 years old. Father died 6 weeks ago. You're supposed to be coming to Dust Hollow to settle his affairs." She stared at him. "How do you know all that?" "Your father and I had business." "What kind of business?" Rowan studied her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked to his saddlebag, pulled out a canteen, and held it out to her. "Drink first, then we'll talk." Eliza took the canteen. The water was warm and tasted like metal, but it was the best thing she'd ever put in her mouth. She drank too fast, choked, coughed, then drank again more carefully. "The men who attacked the coach," she said when she could speak again. "Who were they?" "Keller's gang, outlaws. They've been working this territory for 3 years. "Why did they attack us?" "Because they could." Rowan took the canteen back, drank, then wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "They hit every stage that comes through. Take the money, the valuables, sometimes the women. Leave everyone else dead." Eliza felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Then why am I alive?" "Because I got here before they finished." She looked around. The desert stretched in every direction, empty and brutal under the darkening sky. No town, no people, nothing but rocks and sand and the smell of blood. "Where were you?" she asked. "How did you know to come?" Rowan's jaw tightened slightly. "I was tracking them. Been on their trail for 2 weeks. Heard the gunfire and rode hard." "You killed them." 3 of them. The others ran. Eliza tried to process that. 3 men dead, just like that. She'd heard the gunfire while she was crawling out of the wreckage, sharp cracks that echoed off the rocks. By the time she'd gotten to her feet, it was over. "Thank you," she said quietly. Rowan didn't respond. He was looking west, toward the mountains, his expression unreadable. "We need to move," he said. "There's a way station about 5 miles from here. We'll stay there tonight, head into Dust Hollow in the morning." "What about them?" Eliza gestured toward the covered bodies. "I'll send men back for them." "Just leave them here?" Rowan's gaze cut back to her, sharp. "You want to stay out here in the dark with dead men and the smell of blood drawing every coyote and vulture for 10 miles? Be my guest." "I'm leaving." He walked to his horse, a big roan gelding with intelligent eyes, and swung up into the saddle with easy grace. Then he looked down at her, waiting. Eliza glanced back at the stagecoach one more time. Her trunk was still inside, probably crushed. Everything she owned, all her clothes, her books, her mother's jewelry, gone. She turned back to Rowan. I don't have a horse. You'll ride with me. Heat flooded her face. That's not appropriate. Neither is dying. He held out his hand. Your choice, Miss Whitmore. Eliza looked at his hand. Calloused, scarred, strong. The hand of a man who'd killed 3 people an hour ago without hesitation. She took it. Rowan pulled her up behind him with surprising ease. The saddle was hard and uncomfortable, and she had nowhere to hold on except him. After a moment's hesitation, she put her hands lightly on his waist. Hold tighter than that, he said, unless you want to fall off. She tightened her grip. His body was solid, warm. She could feel the muscles in his back shift as he turned the horse and kicked it into a steady lope. They rode in silence. The desert turned from gold to copper to deep purple as the sun disappeared completely. Stars began to appear, more stars than Eliza had ever seen in her life. The air grew cold fast. Are you always this quiet? She asked eventually. Usually quieter. Despite everything, Eliza almost smiled. That's impressive. I've had practice. More silence. The horse's hooves made a rhythmic sound on the packed earth. Eliza's body ached everywhere. Her hands were still shaking. Those men, she said. Keller's gang. Will they come back? Maybe. That's not reassuring. Wasn't meant to be reassuring. It's the truth. Eliza tightened her hands on his waist. My father. You said you had business with him. That's right. What kind of business? Rowan was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, the kind that doesn't matter anymore. He's dead. It matters to me. Does it? Yes. He was my father. He was also a coward and a cheat who ran up debts he couldn't pay and made promises he never intended to keep. The words hit like a slap. Eliza pulled back slightly. You have no right. I have every right. Your father owed me money. A lot of money. He promised to pay it back with interest. Then he got himself killed before he could make good on any of it. I don't understand. What did he owe you money for? Protection. Eliza frowned. Protection from what? From the men who wanted him dead. The cold feeling in her stomach got worse. What men? The ones who've been hunting your family for the last 3 years. Eliza's breath caught. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. You're just pretending you don't because it's easier that way. She wanted to argue, but something in his voice stopped her. Because he was right, she did know. Not the details, but the shape of it. The way her father had started locking doors that had always been open. The way he'd sold the house in Beacon Hill and moved them to a smaller place on the edge of town. The way he'd stopped going to his club, stopped seeing his friends, stopped doing anything except drinking and staring out the window with haunted eyes. He never told me, she whispered. Men like your father don't tell their daughters the truth. They think they're protecting them. All they're really doing is making it worse when everything falls apart. The way station appeared out of the darkness like a ghost, a low adobe building with a sagging roof and broken shutters. Rowan rode up to it, dismounted, then helped Eliza down. Her legs nearly gave out when her feet hit the ground. Easy. Rowan steadied her with one hand on her arm. You're in shock. It'll pass. He led the horse to a lean-to beside the building, unsaddled it, then came back and opened the door to the way station. Inside it was dark and smelled like dust and old smoke. Rowan struck a match, found a lantern, lit it. The single room was bare except for a rough table, 2 chairs, and a narrow cot against the far wall. Rowan set the lantern on the table, then went back outside and returned with his saddlebags. There's a well out back, he said. Water's probably not great, but it's wet. You can clean up if you want. Eliza looked down at herself, at the blood and dirt and torn silk. Yes. Thank you. She went outside, found the well, pulled up a bucket of cold, clear water. She washed her hands and face as best she could, then wet her handkerchief and tried to clean some of the worst stains from her dress. It was hopeless. The dress was ruined. Everything was ruined. When she came back inside, Rowan had set out food on the table. Dried meat, hard biscuits, some kind of dried fruit. He was sitting in one of the chairs, cleaning his gun with methodical efficiency. "Eat," he said without looking up. Eliza sat down. The food was tough and tasteless, but she was hungry enough that it didn't matter. She ate mechanically, watching Rowan work. His hands moved with practiced precision, checking every piece, every mechanism. "How many men have you killed?" she asked. Rowan's hands paused for just a second. Then he continued. "Enough. Does it bother you? Should it?" "I don't know, I'm asking." He set the gun down and looked at her directly. "The men I've killed needed killing, every single one. If that makes me a bad man, then I'm a bad man, but I sleep fine at night." Eliza believed him. There was something in his eyes, not cruelty exactly, but a kind of absolute certainty, a complete absence of doubt. "You said my father owed you money," she said. "How much?" $3,000. Eliza felt the air leave her lungs. That's impossible. We don't have that kind of money. We lost everything when—" She stopped. Rowan was watching her with those cold gray eyes. "When your father's business partner disappeared with all the company funds," he finished. "I know. That's why he came out here. He thought he could start fresh. Instead, he ran into men who don't forgive debts or forget faces. He needed protection. I gave it to him. He promised to pay me back. He didn't. And now you expect me to pay?" "No." Eliza blinked. "No? You can't pay. You don't have the money, but there's another way to settle the debt." Something in his tone made her stomach clench. "What way?" Rowan stood up, walked to his saddlebag, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He set it on the table in front of her. "Open it." Eliza's hands were shaking again as she unfolded the paper. It was a legal document, written in careful script. She started reading, then stopped, then read it again, slower, because surely she'd misunderstood. But she hadn't. "This is a marriage contract," she said. Her voice sounded distant, unreal. "That's right. Between you and me." "Correct. Signed by my father. 6 months ago." Eliza looked up at him. "This isn't legal. I never agreed to this. Your father had power of attorney over you. He signed in your name. It's binding. That's not possible. I'm 23 years old. He didn't have power of attorney. He did out here. He filed the paperwork with the territorial court before he died." Eliza stood up so fast her chair fell backwards. "No, absolutely not. This is insane. You can't possibly expect—" "I expect you to honor your father's debts," Rowan said calmly, "same as anyone else would. By marrying you, a man I just met, a man who—" She gestured wildly. "A killer? A stranger?" "Yes." The single word fell like a stone. Eliza stared at him, at his hard face, his scarred hands, his gun lying on the table within easy reach, and she understood with terrible clarity that this wasn't a negotiation, it wasn't a request, it was a fact. "What if I refuse?" she asked quietly. "Then you'll spend the rest of your life running from the men who want you dead. You said my father owed you money, not that people wanted me dead. Your father owed money to a lot of people. Some of them are patient, some of them aren't. The ones who aren't patient have decided that taking you might convince your father's business partner to surface with the money he stole. Since your father is dead, you're the next best thing. But I don't know where he is. I don't know anything about any of it. They don't believe that. And even if they did, they wouldn't care. You're leverage. That's all that matters." Eliza felt sick. "So my choices are marry you or die. Your choices are marry me for 6 months and then walk away alive, or take your chances on your own." Rowan picked up his gun and slid it back into its holster. "The contract says 6 months. After that, you're free. Debt paid. You can go back east, start over, do whatever you want. But for 6 months, you're my wife. You live in my house. You carry my name. And you stay alive." "Why would you do this?" Eliza asked. "Why not just take the money and leave me alone?" "Because there is no money. This is the only way I get anything out of the deal your father made." "What do you get out of having a wife you don't want?" Something flickered in Rowan's eyes, something that might have been amusement or might have been something darker. "I didn't say I didn't want one." Heat flooded Eliza's face. "I won't. You can't expect—" "I'm not expecting anything except what's in the contract. You live in my house. You don't run, you don't cause trouble. That's it." He paused. "What happens beyond that? is up to you." Eliza wanted to throw the contract in his face. She wanted to scream at him, curse him, storm out into the desert and take her chances. But she was exhausted and terrified, and her hands were still shaking, and she didn't have anywhere to go. 6 months, she said. 6 months. And then I'm free. Free and clear. Debt paid. My protection until then. Eliza looked down at the contract again. At her father's signature, shaky and desperate. At the date, 6 months ago, when everything had started falling apart. "He really did this," she whispered. "He really sold me." "He saved your life," Rowan said, "whether you want to see it that way or not." She folded the contract carefully and set it back on the table. "When?" "Tomorrow, soon as we get to Dust Hollow. There's a judge there. We'll make it official." "And tonight?" "Tonight you sleep. I'll take first watch." Eliza looked at the single cot against the wall. "There's only one bed." "You take it. I've slept in worse places." "I can't." "You can, and you will. You've been through hell today. Get some rest." He turned away from her, picked up his rifle, and went to the door. He sat down with his back against the wall, the rifle across his knees, his eyes on the darkness outside. Eliza stood there for a long moment, watching him. This hard, scarred, dangerous man who'd killed 3 people to save her life, and was now planning to marry her because of a debt her father had signed away like she was a piece of property. She should hate him. But she didn't. She couldn't. Because he was right about one thing. Her father had saved her life. And Rowan Creed, for whatever his reasons, was going to keep her alive. She lay down on the cot without taking off her ruined dress. The rough blanket smelled like horses and dust. Outside, the desert wind picked up, whistling through the broken shutters. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about tomorrow. About the judge. About becoming the wife of a man who looked at her like she was a problem to be solved rather than a person. She must have slept, because when she opened her eyes again, pale morning light was filtering through the windows. Rowan was still by the door, exactly where he'd been before, rifle still across his knees. His eyes were open, alert. "You didn't sleep," Eliza said. "I sleep light. Move fast. We've got a long ride ahead." They left the way station as the sun broke over the mountains. Rowan saddled his horse, helped Eliza up behind him again, and they rode west toward Dust Hollow. The town appeared around midday, a collection of low buildings clustered along a single dirt road, shimmering in the heat. There was a saloon, a general store, a livery stable, a small church with a crooked steeple. People stopped what they were doing to watch as Rowan rode in with a woman behind him. He stopped in front of a building with a sign that read, "Judge Hackett, Territorial Court." "Wait here," he said, dismounting. "I'm coming with you." "No, you're not. I'll bring him out." Rowan disappeared inside. Eliza sat on the horse, acutely aware of the stares. A few women had gathered across the street, whispering to each other. 2 men leaning against the saloon watched her with open interest. The door opened, and Rowan came out with an older man in a dusty suit. The judge looked at Eliza, then at Rowan, then shook his head. "This is highly irregular, Sheriff. It's legal. Legal isn't the same as right. I'm not asking for right. I'm asking for legal." The judge sighed and pulled out a small book. "Miss Whitmore, you're aware of the nature of this contract?" Eliza met his eyes. "Yes." "And you consent?" She thought about the desert, the blood, the men hunting her, the empty, terrifying future stretching ahead with nowhere to go and no one to help her. "Yes," she said, "I consent." "Very well." The judge opened the book. "This'll be quick. Rowan Creed, do you take this woman as your lawful wife?" "I do." "Eliza Whitmore, do you take this man as your lawful husband?" Eliza looked at Rowan, at his hard, scarred face, his cold gray eyes, the gun on his hip. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by the territory, I pronounce you man and wife. Sheriff, you may kiss your bride if you're so inclined." Rowan looked at Eliza for a long moment. Then he held out his hand to help her down from the horse. "That won't be necessary," he said. The judge closed his book with a snap. "Then congratulations to you both. I'll file the papers." He went back inside. Rowan stood there, still holding the reins, looking at Eliza. "Welcome to Dust Hollow, Mrs. Creed," he said. The words felt like a brand, like chains closing around her wrists. "Where do we go now?" she asked. Home, such as it is. He led her down the street to a small house at the edge of town. It was nothing like the house she'd grown up in. No columns, no garden, no brass fixtures or polished wood. Just a simple structure with a covered porch and faded paint. Rowan opened the door and stood back. "After you." Eliza stepped inside. The main room held a table, 2 chairs, a wood stove. A doorway led to what must be a bedroom. Everything was clean but spare. A man's house, with no softness anywhere. "I know it's not what you're used to," Rowan said behind her. "Nothing is what I'm used to anymore." She turned to face him. "What happens now?" "Now you settle in. There's a room upstairs where you can sleep. I'll take the one down here." "You're giving me the better room?" "I'm giving you space. Seemed like you might want it." Eliza looked around the bare, harsh little house that was now supposedly her home. At the man who was now supposedly her husband. At the life she'd fallen into like a trap closing. 6 months, she said. 6 months, Rowan agreed. He walked past her to the stove, started building a fire even though the day was already hot. His movements were efficient, practiced. A man used to taking care of himself. Eliza went to the window and looked out at Dust Hollow. At the dusty street, the hard people, the brutal landscape stretching away in every direction. She was married to a stranger, trapped in a town she'd never heard of, bound by a contract her father had signed to pay a debt she didn't understand. But she was alive. For now, that would have to be enough. The first week passed in a kind of numb silence. Eliza spent most of her time in the upstairs room, staring out the window at the street below, watching the rhythms of a town that felt as foreign as the moon. Rowan left early each morning and came back after dark, rarely saying more than a few words. He cooked simple meals, beans, cornbread, sometimes meat if he'd been hunting. They ate across from each other at the small table, the silence between them thick and uncomfortable. On the 8th day, Eliza came downstairs to find a woman standing in the kitchen. She was older, maybe 50, with iron gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. She was putting away supplies in the cupboard like she owned the place. "You must be the new Mrs. Creed," the woman said without turning around. "I am. And you are?" "Margot Hayes. I run the boarding house down the street, also deliver supplies when the sheriff needs them." She glanced over her shoulder. "Though he's never needed much before now." Eliza felt heat creep up her neck. "I see." "Do you?" Margot set a sack of flour on the counter with more force than necessary. "Because from where I'm standing, you've been hiding in that room for a week like some kind of ghost. People are starting to talk." "Let them talk. Easy to say when you don't have to live here after your 6 months are up." Margot turned to face her fully. "But Rowan does. And every bit of foolishness that comes out of this situation lands on him. I didn't ask for this. Neither did he. But here you both are." Margot crossed her arms. "You planning to hide forever, or are you planning to actually live in this town?" "I don't know what you expect me to do." "I expect you to act like a person instead of a problem. Go to the store, meet people, learn to cook something other than air." Margot's expression softened slightly. "Look, I know this isn't what you wanted, but sulking won't change it, and it sure as hell won't make the time go faster." She left before Eliza could respond. The door closed with a solid thud. Eliza stood in the kitchen for a long time, Margot's words circling in her head. Then she went upstairs, changed into the least ruined dress she had, and forced herself out the front door. The general store was 3 buildings down. Inside it smelled like coffee and leather and tobacco. A thin man with spectacles stood behind the counter, watching her with unconcealed curiosity. "Mrs. Creed," he said. "Welcome. I'm Howard Chen. I run the store." "Mr. Chen," Eliza tried to smile. "I need some fabric and thread and needles, if you have them." "Planning to do some sewing?" "I don't have much choice. Most of my clothes were destroyed in the stagecoach attack." Howard's expression shifted to something like sympathy. "I heard about that. Terrible business. You're lucky the sheriff found you when he did." "So I'm told." He pulled out bolts of fabric. Nothing like the fine materials she was used to, but serviceable. She selected a few yards of dark cotton, some plain thread, a packet of needles. As Howard wrapped her purchases, 2 women came into the store. They stopped when they saw Eliza. One was young, maybe 19, blonde and pretty in a hard-edged way. The other was older, with sharp features and sharper eyes. "Well," the blonde one said, "so this is her." "Claire," Howard's voice held a warning. "What? I'm just making conversation." Claire stepped closer, looking Eliza up and down. "I'm Claire Dawson. This is my mother, Ruth. We've been in Dust Hollow for 3 years, which is 3 years longer than you." "Nice to meet you," Eliza said carefully. "Is it?" Claire smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Funny thing, Rowan never mentioned he was looking for a wife, and then suddenly he shows up with one. From Boston, no less. Must be quite a story." "It's not really your business." "Everything's everyone's business in a town this small." Ruth moved to stand beside her daughter. "Especially when it involves the sheriff. Especially when that sheriff used to keep company with my Claire before you showed up." Eliza felt something cold settle in her chest. She looked at Claire, who was still smiling that sharp, empty smile. "I see," Eliza said. "Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you're just some Eastern girl who doesn't belong here. You'll be gone in 6 months anyway. Everyone knows it's a contract marriage. Everyone knows Rowan's just settling your father's debts." The store had gone very quiet. Howard was staring determinedly at the counter. Eliza could feel her face burning. "Thank you for the fabric, Mr. Chen," she said, keeping her voice level. "Put it on the sheriff's account." She walked out before Claire could say anything else, but she could hear the laughter following her down the street. That night, Rowan came home to find Eliza sitting at the table with a bottle of whiskey she'd found in the cupboard. She'd poured herself a glass but hadn't drunk it yet. "Rough day?" he asked, hanging up his gun belt. "I met Claire Dawson." Rowan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Did you? She mentioned you used to keep company with her." "That was a long time ago." "How long?" "Does it matter?" "It might, since apparently everyone in town thinks I'm some kind of interloper who stole their sheriff." Rowan pulled out the other chair and sat down. He looked tired, more tired than she'd seen him before. "Claire and I were never serious. She wanted to be. I didn't." "Why not?" "Because I didn't love her, and I'm not going to marry someone I don't love just because it's convenient." Eliza almost laughed. "But you'll marry a stranger to settle a debt. That's different." "How?" "Because you and I both know what this is. There's no pretending, no hurt feelings when it ends." Eliza pushed the glass toward him. "You look like you need this more than I do." Rowan took the glass and drank it in one swallow. "Claire's going to make trouble for you. Her mother, too." "I gathered that." "Don't let them push you around." "I'm not in a position to push back. I'm the outsider here. The temporary wife. What did Claire call me? The Eastern girl who doesn't belong." "You belong as much as anyone else." "Do I? Because it doesn't feel that way." Rowan refilled the glass and drank again. "This town isn't easy, especially for women. It's hard. It's rough. And people here don't trust outsiders. But if you stand your ground, they'll respect you eventually. And if I can't stand my ground, then the 6 months are going to feel a lot longer than they are." He stood up, took the bottle with him, and went into his room. The door closed quietly. Eliza sat alone in the dark kitchen, listening to the wind rattle the windows. Stand her ground, as if she had any ground to stand on. The next morning she found Margot on the porch when she came downstairs. "Good, you're up." Margot thrust a basket at her. "There's a community meal today. Everyone brings something. You're coming. I don't know how to cook anything these people would eat." "Then you'll learn. Come on." Margot dragged her to the boarding house kitchen and spent the next 3 hours teaching her how to make biscuits that didn't taste like rocks and a stew that wouldn't poison anyone. It was harder than Eliza expected. She'd never cooked anything in her life. In Boston, there had been servants for that. "You're terrible at this," Margot said, watching Eliza nearly burn herself on the stove for the 3rd time. "I'm aware." "But you're trying. That counts for something." They carried the food to a clearing at the edge of town where long tables had been set up. At least 40 people were there, talking and laughing. Eliza felt every eye turn to her when she arrived. "Ignore them," Margot muttered. "Just put the food down and find a seat." Eliza set her dishes on the table. The biscuits looked lumpy and uneven next to the other offerings. She found an empty spot at the end of one table and sat down, acutely aware that she was alone. Then a woman slid into the seat across from her. She was Mexican, maybe 30, with warm eyes and a tired smile. "I'm Rosa," she said. "I work at the livery with my husband." "Eliza." "I know. Everyone knows." Rosa poured herself some water. "Don't mind Claire. She's bitter because Rowan never wanted her, and she takes it out on anyone who gets near him. It's not like that. I know. Everyone knows that too. But you're here and she's not, and that's what matters to her." Rosa broke off a piece of bread. "You met anyone else yet?" "Just Margot. And Mr. Chen at the store." "Howard's good people. His family's been here longer than anyone, came from California during the railroad days." She gestured around the clearing. "Most of the folks here are decent enough. A few are mean, a few are stupid, same as anywhere." "Which ones are which?" Rosa laughed. "Stick around long enough and you'll figure it out." An older man approached their table, tall, broad-shouldered, with white hair and a face like weathered stone. He looked at Eliza with frank interest. "So you're the one who married Rowan?" "I am. Hank Garrett. I own the ranch north of town." He sat down without being invited. "Known Rowan since he first came here. Never thought I'd see him take a wife." "It's temporary," Eliza said. "Is it now? That's what he told you?" "That's what the contract says." Hank grunted. "Contracts say a lot of things. Don't mean they end up being true." He looked at her more carefully. "You're from back east." "Boston." "Long way from home." "I don't have a home anymore." "Then I guess you'd better make one here." He got up and left. Rosa watched him go, then looked back at Eliza. "Hank's blunt, but he's not wrong. If you're going to be here for 6 months, you need to figure out how to survive it. That means making friends, learning skills, finding your place." "I don't think I have a place here." "Everyone has a place. You just have to figure out what yours is." That night, Eliza told Rowan about the meal. He was cleaning his guns at the table, methodical as always. "Rosa seems nice," she said. "She is. Her husband Diego is good people too. Hank Garrett said he's known you a long time. Hank gave me my first job when I came here, before I was sheriff." "What did you do before you were sheriff?" Rowan looked up briefly. "Things I'm not proud of." "Like what?" "Things that kept me alive." He went back to the gun. "This town needed law. I was good at violence. It worked out." "That's not much of an answer." "It's the only one you're getting." Eliza leaned against the doorway. "Claire showed up at the store again today. She asked if I knew how to shoot." Rowan's hands stilled. "What did you say?" "I said no." "Do you want to learn?" Eliza blinked. "What?" "Do you want to learn how to shoot? Because out here, it's not a bad skill to have. You'd teach me, if you want." She thought about Claire's mocking smile, about the desert and the blood and the feeling of being completely helpless, about the men Rowan said were still hunting her. "Yes," she said, "I want to learn." The next morning, Rowan took her out past the edge of town with a rifle and a revolver. He set up targets, old cans and bottles lined up on a fallen log, and handed her the revolver. "Hold it with both hands, like this." He demonstrated, his movements precise. "Line up the sight with the target. Breathe out, squeeze the trigger, don't pull." Eliza tried. The gun was heavier than she expected. When she fired, the recoil nearly knocked her backwards, and the bullet went nowhere near the target. "Again," Rowan said. She fired 5 more times, missed every shot. "This is hopeless." "No, it's not. You're tensing up right before you shoot. Relax your shoulders." "How am I supposed to relax when I'm holding a weapon?" "By trusting that the weapon won't hurt you if you hold it correctly." He moved behind her, adjusted her stance, corrected her grip. His hands were firm, impersonal. "Try again." This time, when she fired, one of the cans jumped. "There," Rowan said. "See? You can do it." They spent 2 hours practicing. By the end, Eliza's arms ached, and her ears were ringing, but she'd hit the target more times than she'd missed. "That's enough for today," Rowan said. "We'll do it again tomorrow." "Why are you doing this?" He looked at her, surprised. "Because you asked." "No, why are you helping me? You don't have to. The contract doesn't require it." Rowan was quiet for a moment. "You're my wife. Even if it's temporary, that means I look after you. That's how it works." "Is that the only reason?" Does there need to be another one? Eliza didn't know how to answer that. They walked back to town in silence. Word spread fast that the sheriff was teaching his wife to shoot. Over the next few days, Eliza noticed more people watching her, some with curiosity, some with approval, some with barely concealed hostility. Claire and her mother glared whenever they saw her, but Rosa smiled and waved. Howard Chen asked how she was doing. Even Hank Garrett gave her a nod when she passed him on the street. 2 weeks after the community meal, a fight broke out at the saloon. Eliza heard the commotion from the house, shouting, breaking glass, the sound of fists hitting flesh. She went to the window and saw a crowd gathering. Then she saw Rowan stride out of the house across the street where he'd been talking to someone, gun belt already buckled, moving fast toward the noise. Without thinking, Eliza followed. By the time she got there, Rowan had one man pinned against the saloon wall and was facing down 3 others. They were drunk, angry, looking for a fight. "Back off," Rowan said, his voice flat and cold. "Why should we? You think you can push us around just because you've got a badge? I think you're going to walk away before this gets worse." One of the men lunged. Rowan sidestepped, fast as a snake, and drove his fist into the man's stomach. He went down gasping. The other 2 hesitated. "Anyone else?" Rowan asked. That's when Eliza saw the 4th man, the one Rowan wasn't watching, pull a knife. "Rowan!" she shouted. He spun, but he was too far away. The man with the knife grinned and started forward. Eliza didn't think. She just moved. She grabbed a bottle from the ground and smashed it across the man's shoulders. He staggered, shocked. The knife clattered to the dirt. Rowan was on him in an instant, wrenching his arm behind his back and forcing him to his knees. "That was stupid," he said to the man. Then he looked at Eliza. "And that was dangerous." "You're welcome," she said, her voice shaking. The crowd had gone silent. Everyone was staring at her. Claire stood near the saloon door, her face twisted with something that looked like fury. Rowan hauled the man to his feet and shoved him toward the others. "Get out of here, all of you. If I see you start trouble again, you'll spend a month in jail." They left, muttering and cursing. Rowan turned back to Eliza. "What were you thinking?" "I was thinking you were about to get stabbed. I had it under control." "You didn't even see him." Rowan's jaw worked. Then, unexpectedly, he almost smiled. "No, I didn't. Thank you." It was the first time she'd seen him smile. It changed his whole face, made him look younger, less hard. "You're welcome," she said again, quieter this time. Margot appeared beside them. "Well, that was interesting. That was reckless," Rowan said, but there was no heat in it. "That," Margot said, looking at Eliza, "was exactly what I meant when I said act like a person instead of a problem. Come on, let's get you home before anyone decides to ask questions." That night, the house felt different. Rowan made dinner. Actual dinner, not just beans and cornbread, and they ate in something that wasn't quite comfortable silence, but wasn't hostile either. "You shouldn't have followed me," he said eventually. "Probably not. You could have been hurt." "So could you." Rowan set down his fork. "I'm used to it." "You're not." "Maybe I need to get used to it if I'm going to survive 6 months here." "You'll survive. You're tougher than you think." "How would you know?" "Because soft people don't make it through what you went through. They break. You didn't." Eliza looked at him across the table, at his scarred hands and hard face and the way he was looking at her, not like a problem or an obligation, but like a person. "Thank you," she said, "for teaching me to shoot, for not treating me like I'm helpless." "You're not helpless. You just didn't know what you were capable of yet." Something shifted in the air between them. Something small, but significant. "Rowan," she said, "why did my father really come here? What was he running from?" Rowan was quiet for a long time. Then he stood up, went to a drawer, and pulled out a folder. He set it on the table in front of her. "This is everything I know about your father's situation. Read it if you want. But it's not going to make you feel better." Eliza opened the folder. Inside were newspaper clippings, legal documents, letters written in desperate handwriting. She started reading. Her father's business partner, a man named William Crane, had embezzled over $50,000 from their company. When the theft was discovered, Crane disappeared. But before he vanished, he'd sent threatening letters to Eliza's father, claiming he had evidence that would implicate her father in fraud schemes. If her father went to the authorities, Crane would release the evidence and destroy what remained of the Whitmore name. Trapped, her father had borrowed money from dangerous people to keep the business afloat, hoping to buy time to find Crane. Instead, the business collapsed anyway. The debts piled up, and the dangerous people started making threats. That's when her father had fled west, desperate for protection. And that's when he'd made his deal with Rowan. Eliza closed the folder, feeling sick. He was trying to protect me. In his own way. Yes. And now I'm stuck cleaning up his mess. Now you're alive and safe. That's more than a lot of people can say. She looked up at Rowan. Do you resent me for being here? For costing you $3,000? I made the deal knowing what it was. No one forced me. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I've got. Eliza stood up, walked to the window. Outside, the desert stretched away into darkness. Somewhere out there, William Crane was still hiding. Somewhere out there, dangerous men were still looking for leverage. What happens if they find me? She asked quietly. They won't. I won't let them. You can't promise that. Yes, I can, because I'm very good at what I do. And what I do is keep people safe. Eliza turned to face him. Even people you don't like? I never said I didn't like you. You've barely spoken to me in 2 weeks. I'm not good at talking. I'm good at doing. He paused. But if you want me to talk more, I'll try. It was such an awkward, honest offer that Eliza almost laughed. I'd like that. All right then. That night, lying in bed, Eliza thought about the way Rowan had almost smiled after she'd hit the man with the bottle, about the way he'd looked at her across the table, about the careful way he was trying, in his rough, inadequate way, to make this bearable for her. She thought about Claire's bitter face and Margot's sharp advice and Rosa's kindness, about the desert and the dust and the brutal, honest reality of this place. And she thought that maybe, just maybe, she could survive 6 months here after all. The following weeks fell into a rhythm. Rowan taught her to shoot every morning before he went to work. She practiced cooking with Margot, getting slightly better each time. She started helping Rosa at the livery, learning to care for horses, to mend tack, to do the hard physical work that frontier life required. Her hands, which had once been soft and pampered, developed calluses. Her skin darkened from the sun. The tight, formal dresses she'd brought from Boston were useless here, so Margot taught her to sew simpler clothes, practical skirts and blouses that could withstand work and weather. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the people of Dust Hollow stopped treating her like an outsider and started treating her like someone who belonged. One afternoon, she was carrying supplies from the store when she saw a woman struggling with a broken wagon wheel. Eliza set down her packages and helped lift the wagon while the woman, a young mother named Sarah with 2 small children, fixed the wheel. "Thank you," Sarah said, wiping sweat from her forehead. "I didn't think anyone would stop." "Why wouldn't they?" "Because helping takes time, and most folks are too busy with their own problems." "I'm not that busy." Sarah smiled. "You're all right, Mrs. Creed. I wasn't sure at first, but you're all right." It was a small thing, but it mattered. That night, Rowan came home later than usual. His shirt was torn and there was blood on his knuckles. "What happened?" Eliza asked. "Trouble at the saloon. Some drifters looking to cause problems. It's handled." "You're bleeding." "I've been bleeding worse." "That doesn't mean you shouldn't clean it." She fetched water and clean cloths and made him sit down while she cleaned his hands. His knuckles were split, bruised. She worked carefully, trying not to hurt him more than necessary. "You're getting good at this," he said quietly. "At what?" "Being here. Fitting in." "I'm trying." "It shows." When she finished, he caught her hand before she could pull away. His grip was gentle, careful. "Thank you," he said. "For cleaning your hands? For trying. For not making this harder than it has to be. For..." He stopped, seemed to search for words. "For being someone I don't mind having around." It was possibly the most awkward compliment Eliza had ever received. But coming from Rowan, it meant something. "I don't mind having you around either," she said. He let go of her hand. But for a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them felt charged, full of something neither was ready to name. Then Rowan stood up. "I should get some sleep. Early morning tomorrow." "Of course." He went to his room. Eliza stayed at the table looking at her own hands, calloused, strong, capable. Not the hands of a Boston lady anymore, the hands of someone who could survive. She thought about the way Rowan had looked at her, the way his voice had softened when he said he didn't mind having her around. 3 months left on the contract. 3 months until she was free to leave. The thought didn't bring the relief it should have. The morning started wrong. Eliza woke to shouting in the street and the sound of horses moving fast. She dressed quickly and came downstairs to find Rowan already gone, his gun belt missing from its usual place by the door. Margot appeared on the porch, breathing hard. "Get inside and lock the doors." "What's happening?" "Keller's gang hit the bank in Silverton last night, killed 2 people. Rowan's organizing a posse to track them." Eliza's stomach dropped. "He's going after them?" "It's his job." "How many men?" 6, maybe 7, against 15 outlaws. Margot's face was grim. "I've seen this before. Sometimes the posse comes back, sometimes it doesn't." She left. Eliza stood in the doorway watching dust rise from the street where the men had ridden out. She counted 4 months and 1 week since she'd arrived in Dust Hollow. 4 months since Rowan had pulled her from that overturned stagecoach. 4 months of learning to shoot, to cook, to survive in this brutal place. 4 months of living alongside a man who barely spoke but showed her more respect than anyone in Boston ever had. And now he was riding toward men who'd already killed twice and had nothing left to lose. She went back inside, but she couldn't sit still. She cleaned the kitchen, reorganized the cupboards, tried to read a book Howard Chen had lent her. Nothing worked. Her mind kept circling back to Rowan, to guns and blood, and the desert swallowing men whole. Rosa found her that afternoon, pacing the house like a caged animal. "Cowboy, come help at the livery," Rosa said. "Sitting here worrying won't bring him back faster." "I'm not worried." "You're a terrible liar." Eliza grabbed her shawl and followed Rosa outside. The work was hard, physical, mucking stalls, hauling water, repairing a section of fence that had come loose. It kept her hands busy, even if it didn't quiet her mind. "First time?" Rosa asked, hammering a post into the ground. "First time what?" "First time waiting for someone to come back from something dangerous." Eliza drove her own post harder than necessary. "Yes." "Gets easier, sort of. You learn to live with it." Rosa wiped sweat from her face. "Diego does runs to Fort Lawson twice a month. Dangerous road, bad territory. Every time he leaves, I wonder if he's coming back. But I can't live my life holding my breath, so I work instead. Makes the time pass." "How long have you been married?" 8 years. "Best and worst thing I ever did." Rosa smiled. "Diego drives me crazy. He's stubborn, and he snores, and he leaves his boots in the middle of the floor. But I'd rather have him here, boots and all, than have the cleanest house in the territory." "Rowan and I aren't. It's not like that." "Isn't it?" Eliza looked up sharply. Rosa was watching her with knowing eyes. "The contract ends in less than 2 months," Eliza said. "Contracts end. Feelings don't always follow the same schedule." "I don't have feelings for him." "All right. I don't." "I believe you." Rosa didn't sound like she believed her at all. They worked until sunset. When Eliza finally went home, the house felt emptier than it ever had before. She made dinner, stew, because that's what Rowan had taught her, and it was one of the few things she could reliably make edible. Then she sat at the table and waited. Night fell. No sign of the posse. She tried to sleep but couldn't. Every sound made her jump, the wind rattling the shutters, a dog barking somewhere in town, the creak of old wood settling. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying not to imagine all the ways a man could die in the desert. The second day was worse. By afternoon, people in town were starting to gather in small groups, talking in low voices. Eliza caught fragments as she walked past. "Should have been back by now." 15 against 7. Bad odds. "Remember what happened to Porter's posse 5 years back?" None of them came home. Claire was standing outside the general store with her mother when Eliza passed. "Must be hard," Claire called out, her voice dripping false sympathy. "Waiting for a husband you barely know. Though I suppose it would be easier if you actually loved him." Eliza stopped walking. She turned slowly to face Claire. "You're right," she said, keeping her voice level. "I don't know him the way you wanted to, but I know he's out there risking his life for this town while you're standing here running your mouth. So maybe save your sympathy for someone who needs it." Claire's face flushed red. "How dare you? She dares just fine, Margot said, appearing beside Eliza. And she's right. You want to be useful? Go help Sarah with her kids while her husband's out there too. Otherwise, shut up. She steered Eliza away before Claire could respond. That felt good, didn't it? Margot asked. Terrifying, actually. Good. Means you're still alive. Margot squeezed her arm. He'll come back. Rowan's too mean to die easy. But the sun set again, and still no riders appeared on the horizon. The third morning, Eliza woke to the sound of church bells. Not the regular pattern for services, sharp, urgent clangs that meant news. She dressed faster than she ever had and ran outside. A crowd had gathered in the street, and there, riding slowly toward town, were 5 men on exhausted horses. Eliza counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. She counted again. Still only 5. Rowan was in front, slumped in his saddle, his face gray with exhaustion. Diego rode beside him, blood staining his shirt. The other 3 men looked like they'd been through hell. 2 didn't make it, someone in the crowd said. Johnson and Martinez dead. The riders stopped. Diego nearly fell getting off his horse. Rosa ran to him, catching him before he collapsed. Rowan dismounted more carefully, moving like every muscle hurt. Then he saw Eliza. For a moment, they just looked at each other across the dusty street. His face was covered in dirt and dried blood. His or someone else's, she couldn't tell. His eyes were hollow, exhausted. She crossed the distance between them without thinking. Stopped a foot away, suddenly unsure. You didn't throw yourself at a man you were only married to on paper. You didn't... Rowan pulled her against his chest, hard and sudden. His arms went around her like iron bands. He smelled like gunpowder and sweat and blood, and he was holding her so tight she could barely breathe. I'm all right, he said, his voice rough. I'm all right. Eliza realized she was shaking. Her hands were fisted in his shirt, holding on like he might disappear if she let go. People were staring. She didn't care. I thought... She couldn't finish the sentence. I know. His hand came up to the back of her head, holding her there. I know, but I'm here. Someone cleared their throat loudly. Eliza pulled back, her face burning, but Rowan kept one arm around her shoulders, like he wasn't quite ready to let go either. We got 3 of them, he said to the crowd. Rest scattered. Keller's dead. It's over. A murmur ran through the people gathered. Relief, mostly. Some grief for the men who hadn't come back. You need the doctor, Eliza said, looking at the blood on his shirt. It's not mine. Mostly. Mostly. There's a cut. It's not bad. Let me see. Later, I need to... He swayed slightly. Eliza grabbed his arm. Now. You need to sit down now. Margot appeared with Howard Chen. Between the 3 of them, they got Rowan to the doctor's office. Doc Fletcher, an old man with steady hands and no patience for nonsense, took one look at Rowan and pointed to the examination table. Shirt off. Let's see the damage. Rowan pulled off his shirt. There was a long gash across his ribs, crusted with dried blood. Another cut on his shoulder, bruises blooming purple and black across his chest and back. You said it wasn't bad, Eliza said tightly. It's not. I can still walk. That's not the standard for bad. Doc Fletcher cleaned the wounds with whiskey that made Rowan's jaw clench but didn't make him make a sound. Then he stitched the worst cuts with quick, efficient movements. You're lucky, the doctor said. Another inch and this one would have hit something important. As it is, you'll be sore for a few weeks. Try not to get shot again. I'll do my best. I've heard that before. Doc Fletcher looked at Eliza. Make sure he rests and keep the wounds clean. If they start looking red or he gets a fever, bring him back immediately. They walked home slowly. Rowan was trying not to show how much he hurt, but Eliza could see it in the careful way he moved. When they got to the house, she made him sit down and brought him water, food, clean clothes. Stop fussing, he said, but there was no bite to it. Someone needs to. You're clearly not going to take care of yourself. I'm fine. You got shot at for 3 days. You're not fine. Rowan looked at her for a long moment. Were you worried? Of course I was worried. You rode off to fight 15 outlaws with 6 men. 2 of them died. You could have died. But I didn't. That's not the point. What is the point? Eliza opened her mouth, closed it. She didn't know how to explain the sick fear that had lived in her stomach for 3 days. The way she'd listened for hoofbeats every time the wind picked up. The way she'd imagined him bleeding out in the desert with no one to help him. "The point is you matter," she said finally. "To this town, to the people here, to—" She stopped. "To you?" His voice was quiet. "Yes. To me. Is that what you wanted to hear?" "I wanted the truth. That is the truth. You matter to me. I don't know when it happened or how, but it did. And the thought of you not coming back," her voice cracked. "It made me realize that 6 months was never going to be enough time to stop caring about you." Rowan stood up, wincing slightly. He crossed to where she stood and cupped her face in his scarred, battered hands. "Eliza," he said, just her name, nothing else. Then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle or practiced or anything like the kisses she'd imagined in her sheltered Boston girlhood. It was hard and desperate and tasted like dust and blood and 3 days of thinking they might never get this chance. His hands were rough on her face, her arms. Her fingers tangled in his hair, pulled him closer despite the wounds he was trying to hide. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "I'm sorry," Rowan said. "I shouldn't have. You didn't ask for. Shut up." Eliza pulled him back down and kissed him again. This time when they separated, Rowan was almost smiling. "Yes, ma'am." "Don't call me ma'am. We're the same age. You act older. You act like you're 80. "Some days I feel 80. Eliza touched the bandage over his ribs carefully. "You should rest." "Probably." But neither of them moved. They stood there in the fading afternoon light, foreheads touching, both realizing that something fundamental had shifted between them. "The contract," Eliza said. "We should talk about it. Later. Right now I just want—" He paused. "I just want this." So she let him hold her, and she held him back, and they didn't talk about contracts or timelines or what came after. They just existed in that moment, alive and together, and trying not to think about how complicated everything had just become. That night, Rowan slept in his own room but left the door open. Eliza lay in her bed upstairs, listening to him breathe, and thought about the way his hands had felt on her face, the way he'd kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. She thought about going downstairs, about climbing into bed beside him, about saying all the things she was too afraid to say in daylight. Instead, she stayed where she was and tried to figure out what the hell she was supposed to do now. The next morning, things were awkward. Rowan made coffee with stiff, careful movements. Eliza made breakfast in silence. They sat at the table, not quite looking at each other. "About yesterday," Rowan started. "We don't have to talk about it." "Yes, we do." "Why?" "It happened. It's done." "Because I need you to know it wasn't just—" He stopped, frustrated. "I'm not good at this. Talking, feelings, any of it. But you need to know that what happened yesterday wasn't just because I was tired and hurt and you were there." Eliza looked up. "What was it then?" "It was because I wanted to. Because I've wanted to for a while now. And I know that's not part of the deal we made. And I know you're supposed to leave in 6 weeks. But I don't care about any of that right now. I just care that you're here and you're real. And for once in my life, something feels right." It was possibly the most words Rowan had said to her at one time since they'd met. They hung in the air between them, raw and honest. "I wanted to too," Liza said quietly. "I've been trying not to. But watching you ride off, thinking you might not come back, it made me realize I'd already failed at not wanting you. So what do we do?" "I don't know. The contract—" "Forget the contract. What do you want?" Eliza thought about Boston, about the life she'd had, the future she'd imagined, about silk dresses and polite tea parties and men who never said what they meant, about safety and boredom and a slow suffocation of everything that made her feel alive. Then she thought about this place, this hard, brutal, honest place where nothing was easy but everything was real, where she'd learned to shoot and cook and survive, where she'd become someone stronger than she'd ever been. "I want to stay," she said. "At least, I want to figure out what this is, between us, without a contract hanging over our heads." "The debt's already paid," Rowan said. Eliza frowned. "What?" "Your father's debt. I settled it 2 weeks ago. Took money from my own accounts, paid off the men who were looking for your family. You've been free to leave for a while now. I didn't know how to tell you." Eliza felt like the ground had dropped out from under her. Why didn't you say something? Because I didn't want you to go. The raw honesty in his voice made her chest tight. You could have told me anyway. I should have. But I'm a coward when it comes to this. Fighting, killing, tracking outlaws, that's easy. But asking you to stay because I want you here, not because some contract says you have to be? That's hard. Eliza stood up, walked around the table, and took his face in her hands. I'm staying because I want to. Not because of any contract. Not because of any debt. Because of you. Rowan pulled her onto his lap, careful of his injuries. You're sure? I'm sure. Even though I'm terrible at talking and I work too much and I'll probably get shot at again? Even though all of that. You know people are going to talk. They'll say I tricked you, trapped you, took advantage. Let them talk. I don't care what people say. You say that now. I mean it. Rowan kissed her, softer this time, less desperate, like they had time now, like they didn't have to cram everything into moments stolen between disaster and duty. A knock at the door interrupted them. Rowan sighed and set Eliza back on her feet before going to answer it. Hank Garrett stood on the porch, his expression serious. We need to talk. About what? About the two men who survived from Keller's gang. Word is they're planning revenge. Against you specifically, and against anyone close to you. Rowan's whole body tensed. When? Could be soon, could be weeks, but they're coming, and they know you've got a wife now. They'll use that. Eliza felt ice slide down her spine. Rowan glanced back at her, his face carefully blank. I'll handle it, he said to Hank. You sure about that? These aren't drunk cowboys. They're killers. I'm aware. Hank looked past Rowan to Eliza. You know how to use that gun the sheriff's been teaching you with? Yes, Eliza said. Good. You're going to need it. He left. Rowan closed the door and turned back to Eliza. You should go, he said. Back east. Where it's safe. No. Eliza. No, you don't get to tell me you want me to stay and then try to send me away the first time things get dangerous. I chose this. I chose you. And I'm not running. These men will torture you to get to me. They'll hurt you in ways you can't imagine. This isn't a game. I know that, but I also know I'm not the helpless girl who got off that stagecoach 4 months ago. You made sure of that. So either you trust that I can handle myself, or you admit you've been wasting your time teaching me to shoot. Rowan stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a short, sharp sound. You're terrifying when you're stubborn. You know that? Good. Maybe I'll scare them off. That's not how it works. Then show me how it does work. We have time to prepare, right? So prepare me. For a moment she thought he'd argue. Then he nodded slowly. All right, but we do this right. No half measures. If you're staying, you need to be ready for anything. Then make me ready. The next 2 weeks were brutal. Rowan trained her harder than he ever had before. Not just shooting, but hand-to-hand fighting, knife work, strategy. He showed her how to barricade doors, where to position herself in a room for the best line of fire, how to stay calm when someone was trying to kill her. Rosa joined some of the sessions, teaching Eliza dirty tricks her brothers had taught her growing up in a rough border town. Diego showed her pressure points and how to break a grip. Even Margot contributed, demonstrating how to use household objects as weapons. You're building an army, Claire sneered one day when she saw Eliza practicing at the shooting range Rowan had set up behind the house. I'm preparing to defend my home, Eliza said, not breaking her stance. Your home. You've been here 4 months. Almost 5. And yes, my home. She fired 3 shots in quick succession. All 3 hit center mass on the target. Claire's smile faltered. Rowan's going to get you killed. No, Rowan's going to keep me alive. There's a difference. She finished her practice and walked past Claire without waiting for a response. Behind her, she heard Claire mutter something about Eastern girls and delusions. She didn't care. 4 months ago, Claire's words would have stung. Now they just bounced off. She had more important things to worry about. The attack came on a freezing November night when the desert wind was howling so loud it covered all other sounds. Eliza woke to the smell of smoke. She was out of bed instantly, grabbing the revolver Rowan had insisted she keep loaded on the nightstand. She ran downstairs to find Rowan already by the front window, rifle in hand. They're here, he said quietly. How many? At least 4, Maybe more. They lit something on fire out back, probably hoping we'd run out that way. What do? We hold them off until help comes. I sent word to Hank earlier. He'll bring men when he sees the smoke. And if help doesn't come fast enough? Rowan looked at her directly. Then we fight like hell and hope we're better than they are. A window shattered. Glass sprayed across the floor. A bottle flew through, flames trailing behind it. Rowan shot it midair and it exploded in a burst of fire and whiskey. But two more came through another window. The curtains caught. Upstairs, Rowan said. Better position. They ran up the stairs. Rowan took position at the front window, Eliza at the back. She could see shapes moving in the darkness, coming closer. A man appeared in her sightline. She aimed, breathed out, and fired. He went down. Good shot, Rowan said, not looking away from his own targets. Keep your head down between shots. More gunfire. The house shook with the impact of bullets hitting wood. Eliza fired again, missed, steadied herself, and fired once more. Another man dropped. How many left? She called out. Too many? The front door burst open. Rowan fired down the stairs, killed the first man through. But two more followed. Eliza heard boots on the steps, coming fast. She positioned herself at the top of the stairs, gun leveled. When the first face appeared, she didn't hesitate. She pulled the trigger. The man fell backwards, taking the one behind him down the stairs, in a tangle of limbs and curses. Rowan was reloading, moving with practiced speed, but his face was tight with pain, his wounds from the posse still not fully healed. There's one coming around the back, Eliza said, seeing movement outside her window. Handle it. I've got the stairs. She turned, aimed, tracked the figure. He was climbing up the side of the house, using the porch posts. She waited until he was close to the window, until she could see his face. Young, mean, with empty eyes that promised nothing but pain. She shot him through the shoulder. He screamed and fell. Behind her, Rowan fired 3 shots in quick succession. Silence. Then more gunfire from downstairs, close enough that she could hear someone reloading. They're in the house, Rowan said. He was bleeding from somewhere, a graze across his arm, fresh and red. How many? 2, I think. Maybe 3. Footsteps on the stairs again, slow, careful. Whoever it was, they weren't rushing anymore. They were hunting. Rowan positioned himself behind the upstairs railing, rifle aimed down. Eliza covered the other angle, gun steady despite her racing heart. A voice drifted up from below. Sheriff Creed, we can do this easy or hard? I prefer hard, Rowan called back. Then your wife dies first. We'll make you watch. We'll make it last. Eliza saw Rowan's finger tighten on the trigger, saw the muscle jump in his jaw. But he didn't shoot. Not yet. He was waiting for a clean shot, not willing to waste bullets. You talk a lot for a man hiding in someone else's house, Eliza called out. Silence. Then, she's got a mouth on her, Sheriff. She's got a gun on you, too, Eliza said. Want to see if I miss? A laugh from below. Then sudden movement. A figure rushing the stairs, firing as he came. Rowan shot him center mass. He fell hard, tumbling back down. But his partner used the distraction to get to the top. He came around the corner fast, gun up, aimed at Eliza. She fired first. The man staggered, looked down at the blood spreading across his chest, then collapsed. For a moment, everything was silent except for the crackling of fire downstairs and the wind howling outside. Is that all of them? Eliza asked, her voice shaking despite her best efforts. I don't know. They waited, guns ready, barely breathing. Minutes passed. Then they heard horses, lots of them, and voices shouting. Rowan, you alive in there? Hank's voice. We're here, Rowan called back. Upstairs. House is on fire. Within minutes, the fire was out, the bodies were being carried away, and half the town was crowded around the house. Margot wrapped a blanket around Eliza's shoulders. Rosa brought water. Doc Fletcher checked them both for injuries. 4 dead, Hank reported. You got all of them, but the house took some damage. Eliza looked around at the bullet holes, the shattered windows, the blood on the floor. Some damage was an understatement. You can stay at the boarding house, Margot said, until this place is livable again. Thank you, Eliza managed. Rowan was talking with Hank in low voices, but his eyes kept drifting to Eliza. Finally, he excused himself and came to stand beside her. You all right? He asked quietly. I killed 2 men tonight. I know. I should feel, I don't know, something, but I just feel numb. That's normal. The feeling comes later, when you have time to think about it. When do you stop feeling it? You don't. You just get used to carrying it. Eliza looked up at him, at his hard face and tired eyes. How many have you killed? More than I can count, less than I deserve to. That doesn't make sense. Not much about this life does. They stood together while the town cleaned up around them. Two people who'd survived something terrible and were now trying to figure out what came next. The contract's over, Rowan said finally. You're free. You can go whenever you want. Are you trying to get rid of me? No. I'm trying to give you a choice. A real one. Not one forced on you by debt or danger or because you're trapped here. Eliza looked at the damaged house, at the people working to help them, at Margot and Rosa and even Hank Garrett, all of them here because they cared. Then she looked at Rowan, standing beside her with blood on his shirt and exhaustion in his eyes, and that careful way he had of not asking for things he wanted because he'd never learned how. I choose to stay, she said. Not for 6 months. Not until some arbitrary deadline. I stay because this is where I want to be. You're sure? After tonight? Especially after tonight. Those men came here to kill us. And we're still standing. We survived. Together. That means something. Rowan pulled her close, careful of her bruises. It means everything. And standing there in the wreckage of their home, surrounded by people who'd become something like family, Eliza realized that somewhere along the way, she'd stopped just surviving and started actually living. The letter arrived 3 weeks after the attack, delivered by a rider who looked like he'd been traveling hard for days. Eliza took it from Howard Chen at the general store, noting the official seal and the Boston postmark with a strange sense of detachment, like she was looking at something from another life. She carried it home, the repaired home, fresh painted and patched, windows replaced and bullet holes filled, and set it on the kitchen table. Rowan found her there an hour later, staring at the unopened envelope like it might explode. You planning to read it or just look at it? He asked, hanging up his gun belt. I don't know yet. He poured himself coffee and sat down across from her. Must be important if you're this worried. It's from a law firm in Boston, my father's old attorney. Ah. That's all you're going to say? What do you want me to say? It's your letter, your past. Open it or don't. Either way, I'm here. Eliza picked up the envelope and turned it over in her hands. The paper was expensive, cream-colored, the kind that whispered money and old families and everything she'd left behind. Finally, she broke the seal and pulled out the single sheet inside. She read it once, then again slower, because surely she'd misunderstood. What is it? Rowan asked, watching her face. William Crane is dead. Rowan's expression sharpened. Your father's partner? The one who disappeared with the money? He was found in San Francisco 2 weeks ago, shot during a robbery according to this. And apparently before he died, he signed a confession. Admitted to everything, the embezzlement, the blackmail, all of it. Cleared my father's name completely. That's good news, isn't it? There's more. Eliza's hands were shaking. Crane kept detailed records. The law firm recovered almost all of the stolen money. And because my father was the only other partner, because I'm his sole heir, it all comes to me. $38,000. The number hung in the air between them. Rowan went very still. That's... He stopped. Started again. That's a fortune. I know. You could go anywhere, do anything, buy a house in Boston, live like you used to. I know. They sat in silence. Outside, someone was hammering at the livery. A child laughed. Normal sounds of a normal day in a town that had become home. There's also property, Eliza said, still reading. A building my father owned before everything fell apart. Commercial property in a good location. The attorney says it's worth at least another $15,000 if I sell it, or I could lease it and have income. So you're rich. Apparently. Congratulations. Something in his tone made her look up sharply. His face was carefully blank, the way it got when he was trying not to show what he was feeling. Don't do that, she said. Do what? Shut down. Pull away. I can see you doing it. I'm not doing anything. This is good news. Your life just got easier. My life was fine the way it was. Living in a frontier town with a husband you never chose. Sleeping with a gun under your pillow because people keep trying to kill you, that's fine? Yes, it is. Because it's real, and it's mine, and I chose it. You chose it because you didn't have options. Now you do. Eliza stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. I chose it because of you, because somewhere along the way I fell in love with a stubborn, difficult man who can't even admit when he's scared. Rowan's face went tight. I'm not scared. You're terrified. You think now that I have money, I'm going to leave. You think I was only here because I was trapped. Weren't you? At first, yes, but not for months now. I've stayed because I wanted to stay. Because I love you. Because when I think about my future, it looks like this town, this life, you. And what if you change your mind? What if you go back east for a visit and remember what it was like to have nice things and not work yourself to exhaustion and not wonder if someone's going to shoot at you? Then I'll come back here. Because nice things are just things, Rowan. They're not a life. They're not a home. They're not you. He stood up, turned away from her, stared out the window. His shoulders were rigid, tense. I can't give you the life that money could give you, he said quietly. I can't give you silk dresses and fancy parties and servants and all the things you grew up with. I'm just a sheriff in a nowhere town, and this is all I've got to offer. Eliza crossed to him, put her hand on his back. That's all I want. You. This. Us. You say that now. I'll say it tomorrow too, and the day after that, for as long as you'll listen. Rowan turned to face her. His eyes were raw, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. I love you. I didn't want to. I tried not to. But I do. And the thought of losing you now, she pulled him down and kissed him, hard and fierce, trying to show him what words couldn't convey. When they broke apart, she kept her hands on his face, making him look at her. You're not losing me, she said. I'm not going anywhere. What about the money? It's mine to do what I want with. And what I want is to figure out what we can build with it. We? Yes, we. You're my husband. Or did you forget? That was a contract marriage. It's over. Then marry me again. For real this time. No debts, no obligations, just because we want to. Rowan stared at her. You want to marry me? Again? Yes, you idiot. I love you. You love me. That's generally how this works. For the first time since she'd opened the letter, Rowan smiled, a real smile, the kind that made him look years younger. You're calling me an idiot now? Someone has to. You clearly can't see what's right in front of you. He kissed her again, softer this time, like he was memorizing the moment. Yes. Yes, what? Yes, I'll marry you again, for real this time, even though you're too good for me and you're going to realize it someday. I'm not too good for you. I'm exactly the right amount of stubborn and damaged to match you perfectly. Damaged? We've both got scars, Rowan. Mine are just less visible than yours. He pulled her close, rested his chin on top of her head. What do we do about the money? I don't know, but we have time to figure it out. What she didn't say, what neither of them said out loud, was that having money changed things whether they wanted it to or not. It opened doors that had been closed. It created possibilities that hadn't existed before. And with possibilities came choices. 2 days later, Eliza rode out to Hank Garrett's ranch. He was in the barn, working on a saddle that had seen better days. Mrs. Creed, he said, looking up. This a social visit or business? A bit of both. Can we talk? Hank set down his tools and gestured to a bench outside the barn. They sat, looking out at the rolling desert hills dotted with cattle. I heard about your inheritance, Hank said. Good news travels fast in a small town. So does bad news, but this one's good. It is, but it's also complicated. Money usually is. I want to do something with it, something that matters, but I don't know what. Hank studied her for a moment. You asking for advice? I suppose I am. Then here it is. This town is dying, slowly but dying all the same. Young people leave because there's no opportunity. Businesses close because there's not enough people to support them. Another 10 years, Dust Hollow will be a ghost town. That's bleak. That's reality, but it doesn't have to be. This place has water, decent land, a good location on the trade route. What it doesn't have is investment, capital, someone willing to take a risk on its future. Eliza looked at him sharply. You think I should invest in Dust Hollow? I think you could, if you wanted to, but it wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be quick. You'd be betting on a town most people have written off. What would it take to make it work? Hank leaned back, thinking. Infrastructure, mostly. Better roads so trade wagons don't avoid us. A real school so families have a reason to stay. Maybe some kind of industry, a mill, or a processing facility for the ranches. Things that create jobs, attract people, build an actual economy. That sounds expensive. It would be. Probably eat up most of your inheritance, and there's no guarantee it would work. You could lose everything. But if it did work? If it worked, you'd have a thriving town instead of a dying one. You'd have built something real, something that lasts. He paused. Your call, Mrs. Creed. Nobody would blame you if you took that money and went back east to live comfortable. But I get the feeling you're not the comfortable type anymore. Eliza thought about Boston, about the life waiting for her there, safe, predictable, empty. Then she thought about Dust Hollow with its hard people and harsh beauty, about Rosa teaching her to mend tack, about Margot's gruff kindness, about standing beside Rowan against men who wanted them dead and knowing he'd die before he let anyone hurt her. No, she said slowly, I'm not the comfortable type anymore. She rode back to town with her mind spinning. That night, she spread papers across the kitchen table, the letter from the attorney, estimates Hank had helped her sketch out, a rough map of the town with notes about where improvements could be made. Rowan came home to find her surrounded by calculations and half-formed plans. What's all this? He asked. An idea, probably a terrible one. Let me be the judge of that. She explained everything. Hank's assessment, the investments Dust Hollow needed, the risk of spending nearly everything she'd inherited on a town that might fail anyway. When she finished, Rowan was quiet for a long time. You'd stay here, he said finally. Permanently. Tie your future to this place. Our future, if you want that. I do. But Eliza, if this doesn't work, you'll have nothing left. The money will be gone. But we'll still have each other. And honestly, that's worth more than any amount of money. You're serious about this? I am. This town saved my life. You saved my life. I want to give something back. Build something that matters. Make this place somewhere people want to be instead of somewhere they're just surviving. Rowan looked down at her papers, at the careful notes and ambitious plans. This is going to be hard. Probably the hardest thing you've ever done. I know. People are going to fight you. They're going to say you're an outsider trying to change things. They're going to resist every step. I know that too. And you still want to do it? Yes, but only if you're with me. I can't do this alone. Rowan pulled her to her feet and wrapped his arms around her. You're not alone. You've got me. And if you want to bet everything on this town, then we'll bet together. You're sure? I'm sure. Besides, someone needs to keep you from getting yourself killed trying to build roads and schools. Eliza laughed despite herself. Is that your way of saying you believe in me? That's my way of saying I love you, and you're either brilliant or crazy, and I'm willing to find out which. The next week was a blur of meetings. Eliza met with Hank to finalize plans for a lumber mill that could process wood from the mountains and create jobs. She met with Howard Chen about expanding the general store to serve as a proper trading post. She met with Doc Fletcher about building a real clinic with space for recovery beds and proper equipment. Not everyone was supportive. Claire's mother Ruth stood up at a town meeting and called the whole thing a waste. You're throwing money at problems that can't be fixed. This town has been dying for years. Why would some Eastern girl's money change that? Because I'm not just throwing money, Eliza said, keeping her voice steady. I'm investing in people, in skills, in infrastructure, in the things that give people a reason to stay and build lives here. Yes, it's a risk, but doing nothing is a guarantee of failure. At least this way we have a chance. And when you get bored and leave, what happens to all these grand plans then? I'm not leaving. This is my home now. For how long? Until the next adventure? Until you remember you're too good for us? Eliza felt Rowan tense beside her, but she put a hand on his arm. I'm not too good for anyone. I'm just someone who's been given an opportunity to help, and I'm choosing to take it. You can be part of it or not. That's your choice. But I'm doing this either way." The room was quiet. Then Rosa stood up. "I think it's a good idea. My husband and I will help however we can." "So will I," Margot added. One by one, others voiced support. Not everyone. Claire and Ruth and a few others sat with their arms crossed, faces tight with disapproval. But enough people were willing to try that Eliza felt the first real spark of hope. After the meeting, Judge Hackett pulled her aside. "You know what you're doing?" "Honestly, no, but I'm going to try anyway." "That's either very brave or very foolish, maybe both." He smiled slightly. "But for what it's worth, I think this town needs someone foolish enough to believe it can be saved. Good luck, Mrs. Creed." The work started immediately. Eliza sent telegrams to Boston authorizing the sale of her father's property and the transfer of funds. She hired workers to improve the road connecting Dust Hollow to the main trade route. She purchased equipment for the lumber mill and paid to have it shipped in pieces that would take weeks to assemble. And she threw herself into the physical work alongside everyone else. She helped clear brush for the new schoolhouse site, carried water for the work crews, spent hours in the hot sun doing manual labor that left her exhausted and filthy. "You don't have to do this," Rosa said one afternoon as they hauled boards for the mill construction. "You paid for it. You could just supervise. If I'm asking people to work hard for this, I need to work hard too. Otherwise, I'm just another rich person telling other people what to do." "You're definitely not like other rich people." "Good. I'd hate to be predictable," Rosa laughed. "No danger of that." But the real test came 6 weeks into construction when a messenger arrived from Boston. Eliza was at the mill site when Howard Chen found her, waving an envelope. "From your attorney," he said, slightly out of breath. The writer said it was urgent. Eliza's stomach dropped. She opened the letter right there, dirt on her hands, sweat on her face. The property in Boston had sold, but for less than expected. And there were unexpected legal fees, and taxes she hadn't known about. The total amount being transferred was considerably less than she'd planned for. "Everything all right?" Rosa asked, seeing her face. "I don't know. I have less money than I thought. A lot less." "How much less?" "Enough that I might not be able to finish everything I started. The mill, maybe, but not the school and the clinic and the road improvements. I'm going to have to choose." That night, she and Rowan sat at the kitchen table, going over the numbers again and again, trying to find some way to make the math work. It didn't. "The mill is most important," Rowan said. It creates jobs, brings in money. You have to finish that. "But the school, if families don't have education for their children, they won't stay. We'll still lose the next generation." "Can't have a next generation if there's no jobs for their parents." "What about the clinic? Doc Fletcher is 70 years old. What happens when he dies? We need to train someone, have proper facilities." "Eliza, stop." Rowan took her hands. "You can't save everything at once. You have to prioritize." "I know, but it feels like choosing which part of the town's future to sacrifice. Then we get creative. We find other ways. Maybe people can pitch in labor for the school instead of you paying for everything. Maybe the clinic can wait a year while we build up resources. It doesn't all have to happen now." "But what if people lose faith? What if they think I promised too much and couldn't deliver?" "Then you prove them wrong by delivering what you can and working toward the rest. That's all anyone can do." Eliza leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the weight of every decision pressing down on her. "I wanted to fix everything." "I know, but you're not a miracle worker. You're just a person doing the best she can. That's enough." "Is it?" "It has to be." The next day, Eliza called another town meeting. She explained the situation honestly, the reduced funds, the need to prioritize, the hard choices ahead. "I promised you changes," she said, "and I'm still committed to that, but it's going to take longer than I thought, and we're going to have to work together more than I originally planned. The mill will be finished, that's certain. But for the school and the clinic, I need your help. If we can pool resources, labor, materials, skills, we can still make it happen, just not as quickly." "Sounds like you're asking us to pay for your mistakes," Ruth said from the back. "I'm asking you to invest in your own future," Eliza shot back. "I'm putting everything I have into this, every dollar, every hour of work, every bit of faith I've got. If you're not willing to do the same, then maybe you're right. Maybe this town isn't worth saving." The room erupted in argument. Some people agreed with Ruth, others defended Eliza. The noise got loud enough that Rowan had to stand up and restore order. Then Hank Garrett rose to his feet. The room went quiet. "I've lived here 30 years, he said. Watched this town grow and then start to die. Mrs. Creed is the first person in all that time who's actually tried to do something about it. She didn't have to. She could have taken her money and left. Instead, she's here, working herself half to death, trying to give us a future. Now she's asking for help. And I, for one, am willing to give it. I'll donate timber from my land for the school. And I'll put my ranch hands to work on construction 2 days a week. Anyone else?" Diego stood. "I'll donate work time too, and materials from the livery that we can spare." Rosa stood beside him. "So will I." One by one, people stood. Not everyone. Ruth and Claire remained seated, along with a handful of others. But enough stood that Eliza felt tears sting her eyes. "Thank you," she managed. "All of you. We'll make this work. Together." After the meeting, Margot found her outside. "You did good in there." "I asked them to save me from my own miscalculation." "No, you asked them to be part of something bigger than themselves. There's a difference." "Is there? Because I'm not sure I can see it right now." "You will. Give it time." Margot squeezed her arm. "Also, Claire's furious. I saw her face when people started pledging support. Thought she might explode." "I don't want to make enemies." "Too late. You've already made them, but you've made more friends than enemies, and that's what counts." The work continued, harder now, but somehow more meaningful. Families came out on weekends to clear land for the school. Women organized supply drives. The men coordinated work schedules so the mill construction never stopped. And slowly, painfully slowly, things began to take shape. The mill was finished first, a solid structure that could process timber and create jobs for 20 men. Hank hired most of them himself, using lumber from his land to get the operation started. The school took longer. It was built board by board, nail by nail, with everyone contributing what they could. When it was finally finished, a simple one-room building with real desks and a chalkboard Howard Chen ordered special from California, the whole town turned out for the opening. Even Claire came, though she stood at the back with her arms crossed and didn't applaud. Doc Fletcher pulled Eliza aside during the celebration. "The clinic," he said. "I know it's not in the budget anymore, but I've been talking to some people. We don't need a new building right away. My house has extra rooms. If we could convert them, add proper equipment, maybe hire an assistant I could train, it would work for now." "How much would that cost?" "Less than a new building. And people have been offering donations, money, supplies, labor. If you could cover the equipment and the assistant's salary for the first year, we could make it happen." Eliza felt something tight in her chest loosen. "You'd do that?" "This town's been good to me for 40 years. Time I gave something back." He smiled. "Besides, I'm getting old. Need someone to carry on when I'm gone. I'll make it work, somehow." "I know you will. You're too stubborn not to." That night, Eliza and Rowan lay in bed, exhausted but hopeful. Outside, Dust Hollow was quiet under a sky full of stars. "We did it," she said quietly. "You did it. I just stood around looking intimidating. You did more than that. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Rowan pulled her closer. "You've changed this place. Changed me too, if I'm being honest." "How?" "Made me think there might be a future worth building instead of just surviving day to day. Made me want things I never thought I'd have." "Like what?" "Like a real marriage, maybe kids someday. A life that's more than just violence and duty." Eliza turned to face him. "You want kids?" "Someday. If you do." "No pressure." "I think I might, someday." She paused. "After everything settles, after the town is stable." "So in about 20 years?" She laughed. "Maybe 10. I can wait 10 years. Can you really? For you?" "Yes. I'd wait forever if I had to." They fell asleep tangled together, the future stretching out before them uncertain but full of possibility. Outside, the desert wind whispered across the land, carrying with it the promise of morning and everything that came after. The telegram came on a Tuesday morning in early spring, 3 years after Eliza had first arrived in Dust Hollow. She was at the mill going over supply orders with Hank when Howard Chen rode up fast, waving the yellow paper. "Mrs. Creed," he called out, breathing hard. "This just came through, marked urgent." Eliza's stomach clenched. Urgent telegrams were never good news. She took the paper with hands that weren't quite steady and read it twice to make sure she understood. William Crane's brother was contesting the inheritance. He claimed Eliza had no legal right to the money, that it should have gone to him as next of kin. He'd filed suit in Boston and was demanding she return to testify or forfeit everything. "What is it?" Hank asked, seeing her face. "Trouble. The kind that won't go away on its own." She rode back to town, the telegram crumpled in her fist. Rowan was at the house, fixing a section of fence that had come loose during last week's windstorm. He took one look at her face and set down his tools. "What happened?" She handed him the telegram, watched his expression darken as he read. "This is about the inheritance money," he said. "The money you already spent building the mill and the school." "Most of it, yes." "How much do we have left?" "Maybe 3,000. Enough to live on for a year, maybe 2 if we're careful. Not enough to fight a legal battle in Boston." Rowan crumpled the telegram the way she had. "So what are our options?" "Go back and testify. Try to prove my claim is legitimate, or ignore it and let them take whatever's left." She sat down heavily on the porch steps. "Either way, we lose." "Not necessarily. If your claim is solid, if the paperwork is in order." "It's been 3 years, Rowan. Records get lost. Witnesses disappear. And I'm just some woman who married a frontier sheriff. Crane's brother is probably connected, wealthy, the kind of man judges listen to." "You don't know that." "I know how the world works. I know what happens when people like me go up against people like him." Rowan sat down beside her. "So what do you want to do?" Eliza looked out at the town, at the mill running smoothly in the distance, at the school where 15 children were learning to read and write, at the clinic where Doc Fletcher was training a young doctor named Samuel Price, who'd come all the way from St. Louis because he'd heard there was opportunity here, at the new houses being built on the eastern edge of town, at the expanded general store, at the signs of life everywhere she looked. "I want to fight," she said quietly, "but I don't know if we can afford to." "Then we find a way to afford it." "How?" "We've got $3,000 and a lawsuit that will probably cost 10 times that. Even if we win, we'll be broke." "So we'll be broke?" "We've been broke before." "That's not the point. The point is I dragged this town into my mess. I used money that might not have been mine to build things people are counting on. What happens if we lose everything? What happens to the mill workers, to the school, to Doc Fletcher's clinic? Those things are built. They exist. Nobody can take them away. They can if I can't pay what I owe. If Crane's brother wins, he could claim damages, could force me to sell the mill, the equipment, everything." Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then he stood up and pulled her to her feet. "Come with me." "Where are we going?" "Town meeting. Right now." Within an hour, half of Dust Hollow was crammed into the school building. Eliza stood at the front, Rowan beside her, and explained the situation as clearly as she could. When she finished, the room erupted. "This is outrageous," Diego said. "You can't let them do this." "I don't know if I can stop them." "Then we'll help," Rosa added. "Whatever you need." "You can't help with this. It's a legal fight in Boston. It requires lawyers and time and money we don't have." Hank Garrett stood up. "How much money do you need?" "I don't know. 5,000 at least, maybe more." "Then we'll raise it. This town exists because you invested in it. Time we invested in you." "I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking. We're offering." He looked around the room. "How many of you have jobs because of the mill Mrs. Creed built? How many of your children go to the school she paid for? How many of you have gotten care at the clinic she made possible?" Nearly every hand in the room went up. "Then we help," Hank said simply. "That's what people do when they're part of something that matters." Over the next week, donations poured in. Not large amounts. Most people didn't have much to spare, but steady. $20 from the mill workers, 15 from the teachers Sarah Price had hired for the school, 50 from Doc Fletcher, who claimed he'd been saving it for retirement but would rather see it used now. Even Claire showed up at the house one evening, looking uncomfortable. "This is from my mother and me," she said, handing Eliza an envelope with $30 inside. "We don't always see eye to eye, but what you've built here, it matters, even if I didn't want to admit it." "Thank you," Eliza said, genuinely surprised. Claire nodded and left without another word. Small gestures, but they added up. By the end of 2 weeks, they had $4,000. Not enough, but closer. You're going to have to go back, Rowan said one night as they counted the money again. To Boston. To testify. I know. I'll come with you. You can't. The town needs a sheriff. The town will survive without me for a few weeks. You're not doing this alone. Eliza looked at him, at the man who'd become everything to her, who'd taught her to survive and then taught her to live. What if we lose? Then we lose. But at least we'll have fought and we'll still have each other. That's more than most people get. They left for Boston 3 days later. The train journey took a week, and every mile felt like traveling backwards through time. The cities got bigger, the buildings taller, the people more polished and less real. By the time they reached Boston, Eliza felt like a stranger in her own hometown. The attorney her father had used, a man named Morris Webb, met them at their hotel. He was older now, grayer, but his eyes were still sharp. Mrs. Creed, he said, shaking her hand, and Sheriff Creed, thank you for coming. Do we have a case? Eliza asked without preamble. We have a chance. The paperwork is solid. Your father was the legal partner. You're his heir. The money is rightfully yours. But Crane's brother is claiming the confession was forged, that Crane was coerced, that the whole thing was a scheme to defraud the family. That's insane. That's law. The judge will decide who he believes more. The hearing was set for the following Monday. Eliza spent the weekend walking through Boston, seeing it through different eyes. The grand houses that had once impressed her now felt cold and ostentatious. The carefully manicured parks seemed artificial compared to the raw beauty of the desert. The people moved past her in their fine clothes and didn't even glance her way. She was invisible here, just another face in the crowd. In Dust Hollow, everyone knew her name. You miss it, Rowan said as they stood on a bridge overlooking the Charles River. More than I thought I would. Is that strange? No, it means you found where you belong. What about you? Do you hate it here? Rowan looked around at the city, the noise, the crowds, the suffocating closeness of everything. I hate being anywhere you're not. But yeah, this place makes me want to shoot something just to feel normal again. Eliza laughed despite her nerves. Let's not give them any more reasons to think we're uncivilized. Too late. I think I scared the hotel clerk yesterday. You scare everyone. It's part of your charm. I have charm? Occasionally, when you're not scowling. He pulled her close, right there on the bridge with people walking past and giving them disapproving looks. I love you. Whatever happens Monday, that doesn't change. I love you too, even when you're scowling. The courtroom was smaller than Eliza expected, wood-paneled and stuffy. Crane's brother, a pinched-looking man named Arthur with cold eyes and an expensive suit, sat on one side with 2 lawyers. Eliza and Rowan sat on the other with Morris Webb. The judge was old Yan-Su, skeptical of everyone. He listened to Arthur's lawyers lay out their case, that the confession was suspicious, that Eliza had no real claim to the money, that she'd taken advantage of a dying man's last moments to secure an inheritance that should have gone to the family. Then it was Webb's turn. He presented the paperwork, the business records showing her father as the legitimate partner, the confession signed and witnessed by a San Francisco judge, the recovery of the funds through proper legal channels. Your Honor, Webb said, Mrs. Creed's claim is ironclad. She is the legal heir to her father's estate. The money recovered from William Crane's theft belongs to her, not to a brother who had no involvement in the business and no legal right to the funds. Arthur's lawyer stood up. And what has Mrs. Creed done with this money? Has she preserved it? Invested it wisely? No. She squandered it on some frontier town in the middle of nowhere, building projects that benefit strangers while the rightful family receives nothing. I built a community, Eliza said before Webb could stop her. I created jobs, education, healthcare. I gave people hope and a future. That's not squandering. That's investing in something that matters. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Creed, you'll have a chance to testify. Please wait your turn. When she finally took the stand, Arthur's lawyer went after her hard. Why had she left Boston so suddenly? Why had she married a sheriff in a nowhere town? How convenient that she'd received this money just when she needed it. Wasn't it true that she'd been desperate, that she would have done anything to escape her circumstances? Yes, Eliza said. I was desperate. My father died, I had nothing, and I was alone in a hostile place. But I didn't fabricate a confession or forge documents. I received what was legally mine, and I used it to build something meaningful. If that makes me guilty of something, then I'm guilty. But it doesn't make my claim illegitimate. And your husband, the sheriff, how much influence did he have over your decisions? Eliza felt Rowan tense behind her. He had no influence over the inheritance. He didn't even know about it until after I'd received it, and he encouraged me to do what I thought was right with the money, even if that meant leaving him and going back east. How convenient. It's the truth. My husband is many things, but manipulative isn't one of them. He's the most honest man I've ever known. Arthur's lawyer smiled thinly. The devoted wife defending her husband. How touching. Objection, Webb said. Counsel is badgering the witness. Sustained. Move on, counselor. The hearing lasted 3 days. Witnesses testified about Crane's character, about the business, about the legitimacy of the confession. Arthur claimed his brother would never have stolen money, that he must have been forced to sign the confession. Webb countered with bank records showing Crane living far beyond his means in San Francisco, spending money he couldn't have earned legitimately. Finally, on the 4th day, the judge rendered his decision. This court finds that the confession of William Crane, properly witnessed and signed, is legitimate. The funds recovered belong to the estate of Mr. Thomas Whitmore, and by extension to his daughter Eliza Creed. The claim by Arthur Crane is dismissed. Relief flooded through Eliza so powerfully she felt dizzy. Rowan's hand found hers under the table, squeezed hard. But the judge wasn't finished. However, he continued, this court is troubled by Mrs. Creed's rapid expenditure of the inheritance on projects of questionable value. While this court has no legal authority to dictate how she spends her money, I would caution her to show more fiscal responsibility in the future. It was a victory, but it stung. Eliza stood as the judge left, feeling the weight of his disapproval even in triumph. Outside the courthouse, Arthur Crane was waiting. He looked at her with barely concealed hatred. You may have won today, he said quietly, but you've built your empire on stolen money. It will all come crashing down eventually. That's what happens to thieves. Rowan stepped forward, his face dangerous. Call my wife a thief again and see what happens. Arthur's eyes widened slightly. He stepped back, then turned and walked away without another word. You shouldn't threaten people in front of courthouses, Eliza said. I wasn't threatening. I was promising. Webb caught up with them. Congratulations, Mrs. Creed. The inheritance is secure. What's left of it, anyway? Thank you for everything. My pleasure. Though I have to say you've changed since you left Boston. You're different now. Better or worse? Webb smiled. Different. Maybe better. Certainly more interesting. They took the train back to Dust Hollow. Eliza watched the landscape change from crowded cities to open plains to desert, and with every mile she felt more like herself. More like the person she'd become rather than the person she'd been. When they finally arrived in Dust Hollow, half the town was waiting at the station. Rosa ran forward and hugged her. Margot demanded to know everything. Even Doc Fletcher was there, looking pleased. We won, Eliza said simply. The money is ours. The town is safe. A cheer went up. People who donated money tried to give their congratulations, but Eliza stopped them. The money you gave? I'm returning it. All of it. You helped me when I needed it, but this is my fight. Keep your savings. Use it for your families. But you'll need it, Diego protested. We'll be fine. We always are. That night, back in their repaired house, with the desert wind singing outside, Eliza and Rowan finally let themselves breathe. I thought we were going to lose, she admitted. So did I, for a while. Would you have stayed with me if we had? If we'd lost everything? You really have to ask? I suppose not. Rowan pulled her close. I didn't marry you for money. I married you because you're the only person who's ever made me want something more than just surviving. Because you took a dying town and brought it back to life. Because you fight like hell for what you believe in, and you don't back down even when you probably should. That sounds exhausting. It is. You're exhausting, but you're also magnificent. I'm not magnificent. I'm just stubborn. Same thing, really. They fell silent, holding each other in the darkness. Outside, Dust Hollow slept, a town that had been dying 3 years ago and was now thriving. A town with a working mill, a school full of children, a clinic that served 3 surrounding territories. A town with a future. "What do we do now?" Eliza asked. "Now? Now we live. We build, we grow, maybe start that family we talked about." "Now? Why not now? We've got a home. We've got stability. We've got each other. What are we waiting for?" Eliza thought about it. About everything they'd survived, everything they'd built, everything they'd become. About the girl who'd climbed off a stagecoach 5 years ago, terrified and alone, and the woman she was now, strong, capable, loved. "Nothing," she said. "We're not waiting for anything." "Good, because I've been thinking about names." "Already?" "I've had a lot of time to think. Long nights, posse rides, boring town meetings." "And what names have you come up with?" "For a boy, maybe Thomas, after your father." Eliza felt her throat tighten. He would have liked that. "For a girl, I was thinking something strong, something that means survivor." "What about hope?" "Something that means hope, because that's what this town gave me. Hope that there was something better than just surviving." "Hope. I like that." They talked long into the night about the future, about children and expansion and all the possibilities that lay ahead. And for the first time since she'd arrived in Dust Hollow, Eliza felt like she wasn't just surviving or even just living. She was thriving. The years that followed proved both harder and richer than she'd imagined. The town continued to grow, new families arrived, attracted by the mill jobs and the school. The clinic expanded to handle the increased population. Trade routes that had bypassed Dust Hollow started including it on their routes. What had been a dying town became a vital hub. Eliza and Rowan's daughter was born on a cool October morning, screaming her way into the world with the fierce determination of someone who knew she belonged here. They named her Hope, and she had her mother's dark hair and her father's gray eyes. 2 years later, their son Thomas arrived, quieter, but just as stubborn. Rowan turned out to be a surprisingly gentle father, patient in ways Eliza had never expected. She'd catch him in the evenings, reading to Hope from books Howard Chen ordered special from California, or teaching Thomas to tie knots with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "You're good at this," she told him one night after the children were finally asleep. "At what?" "At being a father, at being human, at all the things you claimed you weren't good at. I have a good teacher." "I didn't teach you how to be a father." "No, but you taught me how to want to be one." "That's harder." As the children grew, Eliza threw herself into the town's continued development. She established a lending library, started a women's cooperative that allowed frontier wives to sell their crafts, organized a system of roads that connected Dust Hollow to other settlements. She became known throughout the territory as the woman who'd saved a dying town, who'd built something from nothing. But she never forgot what it felt like to be desperate and alone. Every woman who arrived in town running from something, every family who showed up with nothing but hope and determination, she helped them. Sometimes with money, more often with work and advice and a place to stay until they found their feet. "You can't save everyone," Rowan told her after she'd spent a week helping a widow and her 3 children get established in town. "No, but I can try. Because someone saved me once. You saved me. You saved yourself. I just gave you a reason to." Rosa and Diego had 3 children of their own. Margot retired from running the boarding house and spent her time terrorizing the town council with suggestions for improvements. Doc Fletcher trained 2 more doctors before finally retiring at 85, satisfied that the clinic would continue without him. Even Claire married eventually, a rancher from 2 territories over, and left Dust Hollow without looking back. Her mother Ruth followed a year later. The town changed, grew, evolved, but at its heart, it remained the same. A place where hard work mattered more than background, where people took care of each other because that's what survival required. On their 10th anniversary, Rowan took Eliza back to the spot where the stagecoach had overturned. Someone had built a marker there, a simple stone commemorating the day Sheriff Rowan Creed had tracked the Keller gang to save the lives of innocent travelers. "I remember standing here and thinking I was going to die," Eliza said, looking at the marker. "Instead, you lived, more than lived. Because of you. Because of us. You think I'd be where I am without you? I'd still be a bitter sheriff in a dying town, doing my job and waiting to die. And now? Now I'm a father, a husband, Part of something bigger than just survival. You did that. Eliza leaned against him, looking out at the desert that had once seemed so hostile and now felt like home. We did it together. As they rode back to Dust Hollow, Eliza thought about the long, impossible journey that had brought her here. About the father who'd made a desperate bargain to save her life. About the sheriff who'd honored that bargain and somehow became her salvation in the process. About the town that had been dying and now thrived. About the two children sleeping safely at home, growing up in a place where their future wasn't limited by where they'd come from. She thought about the girl she'd been, pampered, sheltered, unprepared for anything real. And the woman she'd become, calloused, strong, capable of more than she'd ever imagined. The journey between those two people had been brutal, but it had also been necessary. Because here's what Eliza had learned in her years in Dust Hollow. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is the door opening to the best thing that ever could. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what actually matters. Sometimes being trapped is the first step toward being free. She'd been sold to settle a debt. She'd been married to a stranger. She'd been thrown into a life she never chose. And from that terrible beginning, she'd built something real. Something that lasted. Something that mattered. Not because the path was easy. Not because she was special. But because she'd refused to let circumstances define her. Because she'd chosen to fight instead of surrender. Because she'd learned that survival was just the beginning. The real work came in building a life worth surviving for. Under the endless western sky, riding beside the man who'd become her partner in every sense that mattered, Eliza understood something fundamental. Home isn't where you're born. It's where you choose to build your life. It's where you find people worth fighting for and work worth doing and love worth keeping. And she'd found all of that here, in the last place she'd ever expected to look. The desert stretched ahead of them, beautiful and brutal and honest. Behind them, Dust Hollow stood against the horizon, no longer dying, no longer desperate, but alive and thriving and full of the kind of hope that comes from people who've survived the worst and built something better. Eliza had arrived in this town as property, payment for a debt she didn't owe. She'd become its heart, its driving force, proof that sometimes the best things in life start with the worst circumstances. That sometimes the chains that bind you are actually the first step toward freedom. That sometimes the man you're forced to marry turns out to be exactly the partner you needed all along. She'd been Eliza Whitmore of Boston, a frightened girl with no future. Now she was Eliza Creed of Dust Hollow, a woman who'd learned that the greatest strength isn't in never falling. It's in getting up, building something new, and refusing to let the fall define the rest of your life. And in the end, that was the only lesson that mattered. Not where you start, but where you choose to go. Not what's done to you, but what you make of it. Not the contract you're forced to sign, but the life you choose to build when you're finally free to decide for yourself. Dust Hollow would stand for generations because of what she'd built. But more than that, it would stand as proof that transformation is possible. That dying towns can be reborn. That desperate bargains can become genuine love. That the girl who arrived in chains can become the woman who sets everyone else free. As they rode through the town gates, their children ran out to meet them, and Eliza felt the fullness of a life well lived. Not perfect, not easy, but real and hard-won and entirely hers. She'd survived the desert, the danger, the desperation, and on the other side of survival, she'd found something worth living for. That was the real story. Not the marriage contract or the inheritance or the men who'd tried to kill her. It was the choice to stay when she could have left. The decision to build when she could have run. The courage to love when it would have been safer to keep her distance. In the end, the sheriff's debt had been paid in full. But what Eliza and Rowan had built together, the life, the love, the legacy, that wasn't about debts at all. It was about two broken people finding each other in the wilderness and deciding that broken was just the starting point, not the ending. That scars were proof of survival, not marks of failure. That the hardest journeys often lead to the most worthwhile destinations. And standing in the town square with her family around her, with the school bell ringing and the mill operating and the clinic busy with life, Eliza knew that every terrible thing that had brought her here had been worth it. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what you're actually capable of building. Sometimes the worst beginning leads to the best ending. And sometimes the debt you think will destroy you becomes the foundation of everything worth having. The desert wind whispered across Dust Hollow, carrying stories of survival and transformation, of love hard-won and lives rebuilt. And at the heart of it all was a woman who'd learned that freedom isn't given, it's taken, built, fought for, and earned. One hard decision at a time, one day at a time, one choice at a time to keep going, keep building, keep believing that tomorrow could be better than today. That was Eliza's legacy. Not the buildings she'd funded or the businesses she'd started, but the proof that anyone could change their story. That the end didn't have to match the beginning. That even when you start with nothing but desperation and a contract you never signed, you can still build a life worth living. And in the end, that was everything.